stone giant weighing more than 10 elephants stands guard on a lonely island. How it got there is one of history's most baffling puzzles. This is the story of the impossible engineering behind the Easter Island statues. By the end, you will see these ancient wonders not as silent mysteries, but as a stunning testament to human ingenuity. We will venture into a volcanic quarry frozen in time and unpack the radical theory that these colossi might have walked to their posts. This journey rewrites what we thought possible for a society with only stone and rope. What does it truly take for a civilization to leave a permanent mark on the world? The volcanic cone rises from the landscape like a half-finished masterpiece. Its inner slopes are not just rock, but a gallery of giants in progress. Here, in this one quarry, lie nearly 900. Some are just faint outlines emerging from the bedrock. Others are fully carved, standing tall within their stone cribs, staring blankly across the island they were destined to guard. It is a factory floor abandoned mid-shift, and it holds the first crucial clues to how this impossible task was even attempted. The rock itself was the first smart choice. It is made of a volcanic stone called tuff. It is not the hardest rock on the island, but it is uniquely workable. Imagine trying to carve a detailed statue with a stone hammer. You would want a material that is firm enough to hold its shape, yet soft enough to be slowly, patiently chipped away. This tuff was perfect. It allowed the master carvers to create those iconic features, the heavy brows, the long ears, the pursed lips, with a remarkable degree of precision. And the tools they used have been found scattered around the site, simple yet effective basalt picks called. With these, generation after generation of islanders patiently released the giants from the mountain. But the quarry reveals more than just how they carved. It shows us the sheer scale of their ambition. Walking among the partially finished statues, you see a production line frozen in time. One statue might be lying on its back, only its face defined. Another stands upright, its back still attached to the bedrock by a narrow stone keel, waiting for the final cut. The most telling are the ones that were nearly ready to go. They were undercut at the base, often with a V-shaped trench carved around them, and a sloping ramp was prepared down the hillside. They were not just making art, they were engineering a logistical operation of staggering proportions, right here on the mountainside. This leads to the haunting question that hangs over the entire quarry. Why are so many of these statues still here? If the goal was to erect them on coastal platforms, why did the work stop with hundreds left in various states of completion? The site does not look hastily abandoned. Tools were left in an orderly fashion. It suggests a pause that became permanent. This visual evidence points to a society that was pouring an immense amount of energy, perhaps too much energy, into this single cultural pursuit. The quarry, in its silent, crowded state, hints at a civilization reaching a turning point, where the drive to create these monuments may have begun to strain the very community that built them. Understand that strain, we must ask the next, even more difficult question. How do you move a 70-ton stone giant across miles of rugged terrain? The sheer scale of the quarry reveals ambition, but the tools left behind expose a deeper truth about their methods. These artisans had no metal. Their entire toolkit for confronting a mountain consisted of stone and more stone. The primary instrument was the basalt, a handheld pick made from a harder volcanic rock than the tuff they were carving. Think of it not as a delicate chisel, but as a pounding tool. The technique is called direct percussion, which is a technical way of saying they hit the rock over and over and over again to slowly chip it away. One master carver would hold the point against the cliff face, while another struck its head with a heavy stone hammer. Each strike removed a tiny fragment, maybe the size of a fingernail. To carve a single statue's eyebrow line, that motion would need to be repeated thousands upon thousands of times. This was not a swift process of cutting, but a patient, relentless act of persuasion against the mountain itself. The sound of that work must have been a constant, rhythmic heartbeat echoing through the quarry for generations. Teams would work in shifts, perhaps for a year or more on a single medium-sized statue, their entire world reduced to the incremental emergence of a nose, an ear, a set of lips from the stubborn rock. Yet within this seemingly brutal method lay a sophisticated understanding of geometry and physics. The statues were not carved standing up. They were sculpted lying on their backs, angled slightly upward. This was a brilliant piece of practical engineering. That upward tilt meant that once the final stone keel connecting the statues back to the mountain was cut, gravity itself became the primary mover. The giant could then be carefully slid, likely on a bed of lubricated soil or small stones, down a prepared ramp from its birth niche. They were not just artists, they were production managers thinking several steps ahead, designing the exit strategy at the very moment of creation. This fusion of immense patience and clever pragmatism solved the first half of the equation, but it only set the stage for a far more daunting puzzle. How do you transport a finished, multi-ton masterpiece across miles of uneven, rolling hills to its final ceremonial home? Moving a statue was an operation that transformed the entire community into a single living machine. The distances were not trivial. Some of the ceremonial platforms, known as Ahu, were over 10 miles from the quarry. The terrain was not a smooth plain, but a rugged landscape of ancient volcanic flows, steep inclines, and soft, uneven soil. And the cargo was not a simple block, but a fragile, top-heavy figure with a distinct center of gravity. This was the ultimate test of this ingenuity, a logistical puzzle that has defined the mystery of Easter Island for centuries. The traditional explanation, taught for generations, paints a vivid but troubling picture. It suggests the islanders cut down the island's iconic palm forests to create a highway of logs. They would have levered a statue onto a massive wooden sledge, then used teams of people pulling on ropes to drag it forward over these rolling logs, constantly moving the rear logs to the front in a painstaking, grueling procession. This method would work, but the cost, as the theory goes, was catastrophic. It required an immense amount of wood, leading to the complete deforestation of the island. Without trees to anchor the soil, erosion would have set in. Without wood for canoes, fishing would have declined. This narrative concludes that the islanders, in their fervor to honor their ancestors, literally sawed off the branch they were sitting on, engineering their own ecological and social collapse for the sake of these stone giants. It is a compelling, cautionary tale. But what if the very foundation of that story is wrong? What if they never needed those vast forests of logs at all? The math of this traditional method starts to unravel under closer scrutiny. Experiments have shown that moving an 80-ton statue on a log sledge would require a coordinated pull force equivalent to hundreds of people. The friction, even with lubrication, would be immense. More critically, the wear and tear on the wooden rails would be extraordinary, demanding a constant supply of fresh timber. Given the number of statues moved, over 300 of them successfully transported across the island, the sheer volume of wood required stretches belief, even for a once forested island. This discrepancy is the crack in the old theory where new, revolutionary ideas have begun to shine through. It forces us to reconsider everything. If not logs and sledges, then how? The answer may be far more elegant, and it lies not in complex machinery, but in a simple, profound understanding of balance and rhythm. It suggests the statues did not roll or drag to their altars. Perhaps, in a feat that seems to defy physics itself, they walked. The idea that these stone giants could walk seemed, for centuries, like pure fantasy. Then in 2012, a team of archaeologists and engineers decided to test it with a bold, hands-on experiment. They built a concrete replica of a not full-size but weighing a hefty 5 tons, and they asked a simple question. Could a small team move it using nothing but ropes and rhythm? The method they proposed was deceptively simple, rooted in a basic principle of physics we all understand from moving a tall refrigerator or a heavy bookcase. If you rock a tall object side to side, you can walk it forward in a slow, controlled shuffle. The key is coordination, not brute force. They attached 3 sets of ropes to their replica. One set pulled on the left side to tip it left, another on the right to tip it right, and a third set at the back acted as a safety brake, controlling the forward tilt. With just 18 people working in unison, they found a rhythm. A pull to the left, the statue rocks onto its left corner. As it comes back to center, a pull to the right rocks it onto its right corner. With each rocking cycle, the statue shuffled forward by about the length of a shoe. It was not a walk, but a dignified, ponderous waddle. And it worked. This walking hypothesis was revolutionary because it solved multiple puzzles at once. It explained the statue's very specific design. Their bellies are rounded and protruding, which shifts their center of mass forward. Combined with their slightly leaning posture, this design makes them want to tip forward onto their faces, but that forward pitch is exactly what the rocking motion harnesses and controls. The statues were engineered, from the moment they were carved, not just to stand, but to move. This method also rendered the old deforestation story almost obsolete. You do not need a highway of logs. You need strong rope made from the island's tough hibiscus bark, and you need coordinated, practiced labor. The process itself could have been transformed into a powerful cultural ritual. Imagine the scene. A team of islanders, moving in perfect time to rhythmic chants and drumbeats, literally walking their ancestor across the land. The transport was not just logistics, it was a performance, a ceremony of communal effort that reinforced social bonds with every single, earth-shaking step. It was elegant engineering disguised as sacred dance. Yet for all its brilliance, this walking theory left one final, monumental challenge completely unanswered. Rocking a statue across flat, open ground is one thing, but how do you get a multi-ton, walking giant to stop, turn 90 degrees, and then stand perfectly upright on a narrow stone platform, often with its back to the sea? The final act of this impossible engineering feat was perhaps the most precarious of all. The sledge and roller method represents the classic solution, the one that feels most intuitive to our modern minds. Before anyone dared to suggest the statues could walk, this was the accepted narrative, given a dramatic test in the 1950s by explorer Thor. His team managed to move a replica statue by securing it to a large wooden Y-shaped sledge. They then placed this sledge atop a series of round logs, using teams of men pulling on ropes to drag it forward. As the sledge advanced, workers would rush to pick up the rollers from the back and run them to the front, creating a continuous, rolling pathway. It was a method of pure mechanical advantage, and it worked. The demonstration proved that with enough people and enough timber, the task was physically possible. But proving something is possible is not the same as proving it happened. This method, while effective, comes with staggering logistical demands. First, it requires an enormous amount of strong, straight timber for both the heavy sledge and the countless rollers. Each roller would be under immense pressure, likely splitting or wearing down after only a short distance. For a statue traveling 10 miles, you would need a small forest's worth of logs, constantly cycled from back to front. Second, it demands a huge, coordinated workforce, perhaps several hundred people just to manage the pulling, the rollers, and the steering. The process would be slow, grueling, and incredibly dangerous, with the constant risk of the massive sledge slipping off its wooden track. This theory does more than explain transport. It builds a powerful story about consequence. It paints a picture of a society so committed to this cultural project that they were willing to expend their most vital resource, the island's palm forests, to achieve it. In this narrative, the very success of moving hundreds of statues led directly to an ecological turning point. Without trees, the soil eroded. Without wood for canoes, deep-sea fishing declined. The landscape that once supported a monument-building civilization could no longer sustain it. This creates a poignant, cautionary tale of a culture potentially engineering its own hardship through the sheer scale of its ambition. It is a compelling and sobering idea that has shaped our view of Easter Island for decades. Yet, this very compelling story hinges on one critical assumption, that the sledge and roller method was the only way, or even the primary way, to move their giants. The walking experiment challenges that assumption at its core, suggesting a path that required far less of the island's physical resources, but perhaps far more of its social and intellectual ones. It presents us with two very different visions of the past, one of relentless consumption and another of ingenious balance. This leaves us at a fascinating crossroads in the story where we must look beyond the how and ask the deeper why. What drove this society to dedicate generations to such an astonishing, all-consuming project? The answer may lie not in the quarries or the roads, but in the very meaning of the statues themselves. The landscape of Easter Island is a sculpture of its own, carved by ancient volcanoes into a terrain of rolling hills, sharp ridges, and soft soil. This was not a blank canvas for the statue movers, but a complex, three-dimensional maze. The journey from quarry to coast was never a straight line. It was a strategic negotiation with the land itself, and the engineers were master negotiators. They did not simply fight the topography, they learned to work with it, turning natural features into tools for their monumental task. Evidence on the ground supports this. Researchers have identified what appear to be prepared transit corridors, ancient roads leading radially outward from the quarry. Some of these paths show parallel grooves worn into the bedrock, not from logs rolling, but perhaps from the repeated, shuffling passage of statues, their stone bases slowly grinding a signature into the earth over countless journeys. Descending from the high quarry was the first major hurdle. Moving a multi-ton statue down a steep, unstable slope seems like a recipe for disaster. But here, gravity could become an ally. The solution may have involved a controlled slide. By constructing a prepared, lubricated ramp of soil and gravel, and using teams with heavy ropes acting as dynamic brakes, they could have lowered a statue in a slow, deliberate descent. The ropes would not just hold the statue back, but carefully steer it, preventing a catastrophic tumble. It would have been a moment of intense focus and perfect coordination, where a single mistake meant the loss of a generation's work. Once on flatter ground, the method could shift to the rhythmic walking or careful dragging suited to that specific terrain. But the final approach to an Ahu platform presented the opposite problem. Many of these ceremonial altars are built up on stone foundations, requiring the statue to be lifted, sometimes several meters, to stand upright. How do you elevate a stone giant? One compelling theory involves the lever and fulcrum system, a principle known since antiquity. Imagine teams inserting long, strong wooden poles under the statue's base. Using a lower stone as a pivot point, they could push down on the poles, lifting the statue's front edge just a few inches. Workers would then quickly fill the space with stones and earth, creating a new, slightly higher base. The process would repeat, inching the statue upward like climbing a staircase made of rubble. It was slow, meticulous work, but it transformed an impossible lift into a series of small, manageable victories. Another possibility is the construction of a large earthen ramp. By building a sloping mound of compacted soil and stones directly against the Ahu's back, the statue could be walked or dragged up to the very spot where it would stand. Once upright, the ramp would be dismantled, leaving the standing alone and imposing on its platform. Each statue's journey was likely a unique combination of these techniques, adapted to the specific challenges of its route. The topography was not a uniform obstacle, but a series of distinct puzzles, each demanding a creative, site-specific solution. This adaptive engineering reveals a society deeply attuned to their environment, capable of reading the land and inventing the right tool for the right moment. Their greatest resource was not timber or rope, but a flexible, collective intelligence. After solving the puzzle of the journey, we are left facing the statues themselves, silent and enigmatic on their platforms. But what were they meant to say? Their purpose was not just to stand, but to communicate, and to do that, they needed something vital that many of them now lack. The final destination was not just a spot on the ground, but a stage engineered for eternity. This was the Ahu, the massive ceremonial platform that would become a permanent home. To think of these platforms as simple stone foundations is to miss their brilliance entirely. They are masterpieces of dry stone masonry, constructed entirely without mortar. Each platform is a precise alignment of fitted basalt blocks, some weighing several tons themselves, painstakingly shaped to lock together through gravity and geometry alone. These were not random piles of rock. They were engineered structures designed with a sacred purpose in mind. Many Ahu were positioned to face inland, toward the village communities, with the statues' backs to the sea. This created a powerful visual connection, a line of ancestral guardians watching over the living. The scale of some platforms is almost beyond comprehension. Ahu, the largest ever built, stretches for over 200 feet and now supports 15 towering after a meticulous restoration. Building something of that magnitude, perfectly level and stable on often uneven ground, required a profound understanding of load and balance. The platform had to do more than just hold a statue. It had to withstand the incredible dynamic forces involved in the final act of raising the Colossus upright. This was a structure built with the final, dramatic ceremony in mind, its strength tested in one breathtaking moment. Furthermore, many of these platforms served a dual purpose, also functioning as sacred memorial sites. This added another layer of complexity and meaning to their construction. They were not just engineering projects, they were the spiritual heart of the community, a place where the legacy of the past was physically with the monuments of the present. The Ahu demonstrates that this genius was not limited to moving stone giants. It extended to creating the unmovable, perfectly fitted foundations that would anchor those giants for centuries. The statue and its platform were two halves of a single, integrated vision. But even with a giant standing proudly on its Ahu, the work was not quite finished. To truly come to life, to fulfill its purpose as a conduit to the ancestors, the statue needed a face, and not just the one carved in the quarry. It needed eyes to see. The final, most dangerous step was not moving the giant, but standing it up. Picture an 80-ton statue lying on its back at the foot of its stone platform. The goal is to pivot this colossal weight from horizontal to vertical and place it perfectly onto a narrow stone pedestal, all without modern machinery. One miscalculation, one rope snapping under strain, and years of communal effort could shatter on the rocks in an instant. This was engineering without a net, and the method they likely used reveals a breathtaking grasp of physics. The most widely accepted theory involves the construction of a temporary earthen ramp. Workers would build a massive, sloping mound of compacted soil, rubble, and stones directly against the back of the Ahu platform. This ramp would rise gradually, its angle carefully calculated. The statue, still lying on its back, would then be hauled up this ramp, feet first toward the platform. Imagine teams pulling on ropes, perhaps using the same rhythmic rocking motion to inch the giant upward. As the statue's base reached the platform's front edge, a critical pivot point was created. The giant's own center of gravity would begin to work for them. With continued pulling from the top of the ramp, the statue's base would slide forward, while its massive head and torso began a slow, gravity-assisted descent into the waiting slot on the Ahu. It was a controlled fall, a delicate dance where the statue essentially stood itself up, guided by ropes and the prepared stone crib below. The sound at that moment must have been a deep, grinding thunder as stone met stone, followed by an echoing silence as the giant settled into its eternal pose. An alternative method, known as parbuckling, is a classic technique for riding heavy cylinders. Long ropes would be looped around the prone statue. Teams at the top of a shorter ramp would pull on the ropes, causing the statue to roll up inclined timbers, gradually rotating onto its base. This method requires immense control to prevent the statue from gaining momentum and rolling right over its platform. Whichever technique they used, the margin for error was vanishingly small. The engineering calculations were not written down, they were embodied in tradition, passed from one master to the next through generations of practice. The successful erection of A was far more than a technical victory. It was the moment the ancestor truly arrived, transitioning from a carved stone in transit to a living presence installed in the community's sacred geography. The collective sigh of relief, the shouts of triumph, the ceremonial chants that would have followed, these completed the statue as much as the final placement of its eyes. With the giant now standing sentinel, the story of its creation seems complete. Yet history tells us this golden age of monument building did not last forever. A profound shift occurred on the island, one that would see the very statues that defined its culture deliberately toppled from their altars. But the story of the does not end at the neck. For many of the most important statues, a final, crowning achievement awaited. Perched atop the heads of about 100 of these giants is another monumental puzzle, a massive cylindrical stone called a. These are not mere decorative hats. They are topknots, or perhaps stylized representations of hair tied in a traditional bun, carved from a strikingly different stone. While the bodies are the pale gray of tuff, they are a vibrant, porous red scoria from a completely separate site called Puna, miles away from the main statue quarry. This was not an afterthought. It was a deliberate, audacious choice that added a breathtaking final chapter to the engineering saga. Imagine the process. After successfully carving, transporting, and erecting a 70-ton statue, the community then embarked on a second, parallel project. They traveled to a different volcano to extract a 12-ton cylinder of red rock, then had to solve the transport and placement problem all over again, this time with a cargo destined not for the ground, but for the top of a stone giant already standing over 30 feet tall. The ambition is staggering. Transporting the likely leveraged its shape. A cylinder wants to roll. One compelling theory suggests the islanders may have constructed a wooden cage or a sturdy A-frame around turning the bulky stone into a giant spool. By pulling it with ropes along a prepared path, they could have rolled these immense topknots across the island, a method far more efficient than dragging a block. But the true zenith of the challenge was the placement. How do you get a 12-ton stone cylinder to perch securely on a statue's flat head, high above the ground? The most plausible answer, once again, involves the strategic use of ramps. Archaeologists suggest that after it was fully erected, workers would build a large earthen ramp directly against its back, rising all the way to the top of its head. This ramp would have been a temporary mountain of soil and rubble, an incredible construction in its own right. It would then be hauled up this slope, likely using ropes and muscle power, until it was positioned directly above the statue's head. The final step would involve careful lowering and precise positioning, ensuring this hollowed-out base settled snugly onto this flat pate. The ceremonial significance of this act must have been profound. The addition of the red topknot was the ultimate mark of completion, a visual signal that transformed an impressive ancestor figure into a fully realized, high-status guardian. The vibrant red stone, visible for miles, would have caught the light of the rising and setting sun, making the statues appear eternally crowned in a halo of sacred power. This final push represents the civilization operating at its absolute peak, mastering not just one impossible engineering task, but layering them in a display of cultural and logistical confidence that is almost difficult to comprehend. Yet this peak, this period of such prolific and confident monument building, would not last. The very society that achieved these feats would soon enter a period of profound transformation, a shift so dramatic it would lead to the deliberate toppling of the guardians they had worked for centuries to raise. The true monument was not a single statue, but the society that built it. To carve, move, and raise even one of these giants required a staggering investment of human effort, coordinated over months or years. For nearly 300 of them, the endeavor becomes something else entirely, a centuries-long cultural project that demanded a social engine of remarkable sophistication. This was not the work of a scattered or struggling people, but of a complex, organized civilization operating at its peak. The old, grim idea of slave labor dragging these colossi under a whip has been thoroughly dismissed by modern research. The evidence points to something far more interesting and powerful. This was likely ritualized, community-based labor, deeply woven into the fabric of life. Think of it not as forced toil, but as a sacred duty and a profound social glue. The work of honoring an ancestor, of contributing to a clan's prestige by raising its guardian, would have provided a powerful sense of identity and shared purpose. It channeled the community's energy, resources, and collective spirit toward a single, awe-inspiring goal. This transforms our understanding of the statues from mysterious follies into the very heartbeat of a thriving culture. The logistics alone reveal a society of specialists. It was not a case of everyone simply grabbing a hammer. There would have been master carvers who understood the grain of the tuff, reading the stone to avoid hidden flaws. There were rope makers skilled in processing the tough inner bark of the tree into immensely strong cables. Navigators and pathfinders would have scouted the optimal routes across the island's volcanic terrain. And overseeing it, all were likely project managers, individuals or councils who could coordinate the sequence of quarrying, transport, and construction, ensuring that the right materials and the right people were in the right place at the right time. This level of organization speaks to a hierarchical structure, one with leaders who could plan for the long term and mobilize a significant portion of the population. The food required to sustain these work teams, the tools that needed constant maintenance or replacement, the ceremonial feasts that would mark each successful stage, all of this required a robust economic and social system humming in the background. They were not a drain on this society, they were its ultimate expression, the project that gave meaning to its structure and unity to its people. For generations, this social engine ran smoothly, turning human collaboration into stone monuments. But what happens when the fuel for such an engine begins to change, or the very landscape that supports it starts to shift beneath their feet? This brings us to a pivotal crossroads in the Easter Island story, the resource management paradox. For decades, a powerful and sobering narrative has shaped our understanding. It tells us the islanders' obsession with the led them to cut down every last tree, triggering an ecological and social collapse. The evidence for deforestation is stark and undeniable. Pollen samples taken from lakebed sediments show a dramatic decline, revealing the slow disappearance of the island's once vast palm forests, which included trees that could grow nearly 100 feet tall. This loss is a historical fact, but the reason behind that loss is where the story gets much more complicated and much more interesting. The old tale directly links the deforestation to statue transport, specifically to the need for countless logs to roll the giants across the island. It paints a picture of a culture so single-minded in its monument building that it sacrificed its own future. This is a compelling cautionary tale about hubris, but modern research suggests the reality was likely a more complex web of causes and effects. If the statues could indeed walk, as the experimental evidence suggests, then the demand for timber for transport would have been far lower. The walking method required strong rope, not endless logs. This simple shift in understanding forces a major reframe. The clearing of the forests might have been driven by a combination of other, more fundamental human needs. Land had to be cleared for agriculture to feed a growing population. Wood was essential for building canoes for fishing, for constructing homes and communal structures, and for fuel for cooking fires. The trees did not vanish for a single, dramatic purpose. They were likely steadily drawn down by the cumulative pressures of daily life on a remote, finite island. This reframes the entire engineering story. The people may have been remarkably resource-light in their most famous cultural project, developing an ingenious, low-impact method to move their stone giants. Their true genius might have been in conserving vital resources for the statues, not consuming them. Yet they still inhabited a fragile, isolated ecosystem. A growing population, even with clever monument transport, would still need more farmland, more canoes, more fuel. The engineering triumph existed within a delicate and ultimately precarious balance with their environment. They were not blindly marching toward ruin. They were making a series of incremental choices, adapting and innovating, while living on an island that could not endlessly replenish what was taken. This perspective does not make their story any less poignant, but it makes it more human, and perhaps more universally relevant. It shifts the lesson from a simple tale of ecological suicide to a more nuanced study of how any society, no matter how ingenious, must navigate the limits of its world. The silence that eventually fell over the quarries and the toppling of the statues may not have been the sudden crash of a civilization that overreached, but the slower, more complex unraveling of a delicate balance that could no longer hold. The statues stood silent, but the stories about them did not. When the first European ships arrived in the 18th century, the great era of statue carving and transport had long since passed. The society had transformed, yet the memory of what their ancestors had achieved was preserved, not in written records, but in the living tapestry of oral tradition. These stories, passed down through generations, offer a tantalizing, fragmented window into the past. Some early European accounts recorded a local belief that they did not need to be dragged. Instead, they were said to walk to their Ahu Platforms, animated by a spiritual force known as mana. To an outsider, this sounds purely like myth, a magical explanation for an inexplicable feat. But what if we are hearing a metaphor that encodes a profound truth? Oral traditions are not just fantasy, they are often vessels for practical knowledge, wrapped in the language of culture and belief. The idea that the statues walked with the help of mana could be a poetic way of describing the very real, coordinated rhythm of the teams, the communal spirit, and the specialized knowledge that made the motion possible. The spiritual power was not a substitute for engineering. It was the cultural framework that enabled it, turning a colossal physics problem into a sacred, collective act. This is where archaeology steps in to provide a concrete conversation with those old stories. The physical evidence scattered across the island offers silent testimony that aligns remarkably with the idea of upright transport. Statues that were abandoned along the ancient roads, never reaching their destinations, are often found in a very specific posture. They are not lying flat on their backs as if they fell from a sledge. Many are found face down, but crucially, they are still in a vertical orientation, their bases often deeply embedded in the soil as if they were planted there while standing. Their design leans forward, a feature that makes no sense for horizontal dragging, but is perfectly suited for a controlled, rocking gait. Even more telling are the broken statues along these transit routes. When they fell, they did not topple sideways. They fell forward in the direction of travel. This pattern is a forensic clue written in stone. A statue being dragged horizontally on a sledge would likely tip or roll to the side if a rope failed. A statue that was upright and in motion, however, would fall forward along its path if it lost balance. The archaeology is not proving the walking method definitively, but it is consistently ruling out other explanations and pointing toward a scenario where these giants were moving in a standing position. Piecing together the oral history with the physical clues allows us to reconstruct something far richer than just a technical manual. It lets us glimpse the cultural mindset that framed this incredible endeavor. For the journey of was likely not seen as a grueling engineering project in our modern sense. It was a ceremonial procession, a ritual of bringing an ancestor to life and installing them in the landscape. The rhythmic pulling, the coordinated chants, the shared effort, all of it was infused with mana. The successful transport was proof of that spiritual power, made manifest through human skill and unity. This fusion of the practical and the sacred transforms our understanding. It means the statues were not burdens to be endured, but ancestors to be escorted. The how and the why were inseparable, two strands of the same rope used to guide the giants home. This perspective helps explain the sheer scale of their ambition. They were not just moving stone, they were performing a sacred duty, and that purpose could fuel generations of effort in a way that mere labor never could. So what happened to this powerful, unifying cultural engine? Why did the walking finally stop, and the era of the standing guardians come to an end? The of Easter Island are a breathtaking achievement, but they are not alone in the ancient world. Across the globe and across, our ancestors performed similar feats of what we might call impossible engineering. Consider the towering sarsen stones of Stonehenge, dragged over 20 miles from their quarry in southern England. Or the granite obelisks of ancient Egypt, some weighing over 400 tons, transported down the Nile and raised to pierce the sky. In the Americas, the Olmec civilization carved and moved colossal stone heads, each a portrait of a ruler, across the swampy lowlands of what is now Mexico. These projects are separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, yet they whisper a shared human story. When we compare the methods, we find a common toolkit emerging from different minds. The inclined plane, or ramp, appears again and again, turning an impossible vertical lift into a manageable, gradual slope. The lever, a simple bar and a pivot point, gave small teams the power to shift unimaginable weights. Rollers, whether logs or rounded stones, transformed dragging into rolling. And above all, rope and coordinated human labor, harnessed through rhythm and song, provided the living engine for these stone machines. It is a profound reminder of a universal human truth. When faced with a monumental cultural goal, our ancestors often arrived at strikingly similar physical solutions. This shared engineering language makes the story of Easter Island not less special, but more illuminating, because here, the experiment was run under the most extreme laboratory conditions imaginable. They were not just building in isolation, they were thinking in isolation. For the builders of Stonehenge, ideas could travel along trade routes from the continent. The Egyptians could draw upon centuries of accumulated knowledge from neighboring cultures in Mesopotamia. The Olmec existed within a web of early exchange. Easter Island, however, was a world unto itself. The nearest inhabited land was over 1,000 miles away, a distance virtually unbridgeable with the technology of the time. There was no outside influence, no trade in new tools or concepts, no visiting engineer to offer a fresh perspective. Every single solution, from the shape of the hammer to the rocking gait of the, had to be invented right there, using only the materials the island provided: stone, rope, soil, and human ingenuity. This transforms their achievement from an impressive construction project into a pristine case study in human innovation under constraint. They had no metal, no wheels, no draft animals. Their palette was brutally limited, yet from that limitation sprang incredible creativity. They did not just copy a method, they had to discover the physics of their world from first principles, through observation, experimentation, and the hard-won knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Their necessity was absolute, and their cultural drive to honor their ancestors was the fuel. This combination forced an elegance of design that outsiders might never have conceived. The walking theory, for instance, is a solution that seems to emerge from a deep, intimate understanding of the statue's own form and balance, a kind of dance-partner relationship between the people and the stone. It may be one of the most resource-light methods for moving megaliths ever devised. So while they stand in a global family of giants, they speak with a uniquely isolated voice. They show us what human creativity looks like when it has nowhere to turn but inward, and no resources to expend but patience and collective will. They are a powerful testament to the idea that innovation is not always about having more, but about understanding deeply what you already have. This realization about their isolated genius leads to a final, haunting question. If they were so ingeniously adapted to their world, what could have possibly changed to bring the age of the walking giants to an end? The driving force behind this centuries-long endeavor was not a quest for glory, but a profound spiritual need. These stone giants were far more than art. They were sacred vessels, believed to hold the spiritual essence known as mana. Each represented an ancestor, a powerful link between the living community and those who came before. Once erected on its coastal platform, the statue became a permanent intermediary. Its back was turned to the vast, unpredictable sea, while its stone eyes gazed inland, casting a protective watch over the villages, gardens, and people of the clan it guarded. This was the ultimate purpose, the unstoppable motivation that could fuel generations of backbreaking effort. The engineering was not separate from the faith, it was the physical expression of it. To carve, walk, and raise an ancestor was an act of profound piety, a way to ensure their continued presence and blessing upon the living world. The scale of the undertaking was itself a statement. A larger, more finely carved, perhaps even crowned with a massive red, was a public declaration of a clan's status, resources, and the potency of its ancestral line. It was a project that unified the community, giving every member, from the master carver to the rope maker to the food provider, a vital role in a sacred mission. This understanding transforms the entire narrative. We are not looking at a society pointlessly moving rocks. We are witnessing a civilization channeling its collective will, its finest engineering, and its deepest beliefs into creating eternal guardians. The statue was the focal point of an entire worldview, where honoring the past was the most important work of the present. This spiritual engine ran powerfully for centuries, but even the strongest beliefs exist within a changing world. The quest to understand did not end with theories written in books. It moved outdoors, into the dirt and sweat of practical experiment. In the 1950s, the Norwegian explorer Thor gathered a team of local islanders and attempted to move a medium-sized replica statue using the classic sledge and roller method. It was a dramatic, physical proof that sheer human power, applied through simple machines, could achieve the task. Decades later, a Czech engineer named took inspiration from local legends of the statue's walking. Using a much smaller concrete model and a system of ropes, he demonstrated that a rocking motion could indeed shuffle a statue forward. These early tests were sparks, suggesting that the old stories might hold a kernel of practical truth. But the most compelling evidence arrived in 2012, when archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl partnered with National Geographic and a team of engineers to test the walking hypothesis on a much larger scale. They constructed a concrete replica weighing 5 tons, attached 3 sets of ropes to it, and with a crew of just 18 people, found a rhythm. Left, right, left, right. The statue began to waddle forward in a slow, controlled shuffle. It was a eureka moment captured on film, transforming a wild idea into a physically plausible, even elegant, solution. These experiments are more than just demonstrations. They are a form of time travel through trial and error. Each attempt teaches us something profound about the physics involved, the required coordination, and the very real challenges the ancient builders faced. The 2012 test, for instance, revealed that the statue's carved, rounded belly and forward-leaning design were not artistic choices alone. They were brilliant engineering features that made the rocking motion stable and controllable. The experiments turn abstract equations into tangible strain on ropes and the crunch of soil under a stone base. Yet for all their value, these modern trials come with important caveats. The teams use strong, uniform synthetic ropes, not hand-braided hibiscus fiber that could stretch or snap. They have the benefit of precise measurements, modern safety protocols, and the ability to run multiple attempts. Most crucially, a single successful experiment does not prove it was the historical method. It only proves it was possible. The ancient did not have the luxury of a test run with a concrete copy. They had one chance with an irreplaceable, sacred ancestor carved over a year of labor. Their margin for error was zero. This gap between a controlled modern experiment and the high-stakes reality of the past is where true empathy for the ancient engineers begins. When we watch a team of researchers successfully walk a replica, we are not seeing a reenactment. We are seeing a shadow of the real event, an echo that nonetheless allows us to feel the weight of the problem and marvel at the elegance of a potential solution. These hands-on trials strip away our modern assumptions and force us to confront the problem as they did, with muscle, rhythm, and stone. They highlight that even with our contemporary insights, the task remains a monumental physical and logistical challenge. This humility before the past is perhaps the greatest gift of experimentation. It closes the distance between us and them, not by giving definitive answers, but by making us feel the magnitude of the questions they had to solve with every single statue they ever moved. Deep within the quarry, one figure dwarfs all others. Known as El, this unfinished giant lies sleeping in the rock, a colossal outline of what might have been. At an estimated 69 feet long, it is more than twice the length of the largest ever successfully erected. Its weight is staggering, calculated to be over 270 tons. To put that in perspective, that is heavier than a fully loaded commercial airliner. This is not just another statue, it is a statement carved in stone, a declaration of ambition that pushes against the very limits of the possible. Its sheer scale forces us to ask new and profound questions about the and their ultimate goals. Was it a project that simply went too far, an attempt that finally exceeded even their remarkable engineering capabilities? Or does its existence suggest that their skills and confidence were even greater than the already impressive statues that stand on the coast? Perhaps it was never meant to be moved at all. Some researchers propose it could have been a symbolic centerpiece for the quarry itself, a permanent guardian of the sacred mountain where all the other giants were born. Its immobility would have been its purpose, a fixed point of spiritual power, yet the evidence on the ground hints at something else. The stone around it shows signs of preparation for extraction. It was partially undercut, a process that typically preceded moving a statue from its niche. This suggests the intention was real. The dream was to see this titan walk. Imagine the social and logistical machinery that would have been required. The carving alone might have taken a generation. The ropes needed to move it would have been as thick as tree trunks, requiring the coordinated effort of perhaps 1,000 people moving in perfect, rhythmic unison. The pathway from the quarry would have needed to be wider and more reinforced than any other. The ramp to raise it would have been a mountain in itself. L represents the outermost edge of their ambition, a ghost of a potential achievement that was never realized. It stands as the ultimate what-if in a story already filled with impossible feats. This single, sleeping giant challenges our modern assumptions about the ceiling of ancient innovation. It whispers that they were not just solving problems as they came, but actively exploring the boundaries of their craft, testing how far their collective will could push against the weight of the earth itself. Its unfinished state is not necessarily a sign of failure, but a powerful symbol of a culture that dared to envision something truly monumental, a testament to an aspirational drive that looked at a mountain and saw not an obstacle, but a canvas for a legacy without equal. Their toolkit was a study in elegant minimalism. On a table today, it would look almost primitive, a collection of stones and sticks. Yet in the hands of these simple objects became the instruments of an engineering symphony. The core carving tool was the basalt, a handheld pick fashioned from a dense, dark volcanic rock harder than the quarry tuff. These were not swung like axes, but used in a precise, percussive dance. A carver would position the pointed tip, while a partner struck the head with a heavy, round hammerstone. Each blow removed a small flake, the statue emerging not from a single cut, but from millions of calculated impacts. For finer work, for smoothing a cheekbone or defining the curve of a lip, they might have used slabs of rough coral or fragments of obsidian, a volcanic glass, as natural sandpaper. This was technology stripped to its absolute essentials, where every tool was a direct extension of human force and intention. The inventory for transport was equally straightforward, yet its application was genius. The most vital component was rope. This was not ordinary twine, but cable made from the incredibly tough inner bark of the island's tree. Processed and braided, these fibers could create ropes strong enough to withstand tons of tension, the literal lifelines of the entire operation. Next came timber, not for endless rollers, but for levers. Strong, straight logs served as pivots and pry-bars, allowing small teams to gain a massive mechanical advantage. They could inch a statue upward onto a ramp, or make minute adjustments to its stance with a controlled push. The final, invisible tool in their inventory was the prepared pathway itself, the packed earth or lubricated soil that reduced friction and guided the giant's feet. This technological context forces a profound redefinition of what we consider advanced. They had no wheels, no pulleys, no metal, and no animals to share the load. Their entire system was built on human power, simple machines, and a deep, intuitive understanding of physics. Their advancement was not in the complexity of their tools, but in the sophistication of their applied knowledge. They understood leverage, center of gravity, and friction. They mastered the conversion of rhythmic, coordinated motion into forward progress. They knew their materials intimately, from the grain of the basalt to the tensile strength of their braided bark. This was engineering rooted in observation and perfected through generations of trial, error, and passed-down wisdom. Therefore, their single greatest tool was not made of stone or fiber. It was their collective human intellect and will. The technology was not just the rope. It was the social organization that allowed hundreds of people to act as a single, harmonious mechanism. It was the cultural knowledge that encoded the correct angle for a ramp or the precise chant to synchronize a pull. Their achievement stands as a powerful reminder that innovation is not always about inventing something new, but about understanding the profound potential of what is already in your hands. With just stone, wood, and rope, they performed a feat that would challenge modern engineers, because their most advanced technology was, and always will be, the human capacity to solve problems together. This realization about their stripped-down brilliance makes the next chapter of their story all the more poignant, for it asks what happens when the very social fabric that powered this machine begins to fray. Their brilliant engineering existed within a living, breathing world of wind and rain. On a remote island, the climate was not just a backdrop, it was an active participant in every decision. The subtropical weather of Easter Island offered a double-edged gift. It provided a long, forgiving growing season for the sweet potato and taro that fed the workers, but it also delivered the elements that could bring a monumental project to a grinding halt. Imagine the scene after a heavy downpour. The island's rich volcanic soil, so fertile for crops, would turn into a thick, clinging mud. Attempting to maneuver an 80-ton statue across that terrain would be like trying to push a car through wet cement, a recipe for getting hopelessly stuck and risking catastrophic damage. The work calendar, therefore, was not just a schedule, it was a dance with the sky. The most demanding phases of transport, the actual walking or dragging of the giants, were almost certainly planned for the drier seasons. This required a sophisticated level of temporal strategy from the project managers. They had to synchronize the Herculean task of moving stone with the essential rhythms of planting and harvest. The community's labor force was its most precious resource, needed both in the fields to ensure survival and on the transport roads to fulfill sacred duties. This created a natural, cyclical workflow. Periods of intense agricultural work would give way to windows of opportunity when the ground was firm and the weather more predictable, the perfect time to mobilize the teams for a statue's journey. Even the wind played a role in their calculations. The persistent trade winds that sweep across the Pacific could be a formidable force against the broad side of a towering. A strong gust at the wrong moment could turn a controlled rocking motion into a dangerous sway. Yet that same wind, if understood and anticipated, could potentially be used to advantage, perhaps aiding in stabilizing a statue or cooling the teams during their grueling labor. This deep environmental awareness transforms our view of their project management. It was not a relentless, year-round push. It was a pulse, an ebb and flow of activity dictated by sun, soil, and season. The builders were not just moving stone, they were reading the landscape in 4 dimensions, adding time itself to their list of tools. They understood that to conquer the impossible, they first had to align with the possible rhythms of their island home. This harmony with nature underscores a resilience built into their plans, but it also reveals a vulnerability. Their entire cultural engine depended on a predictable pattern of seasons. What happens when that pattern begins to shift, when the rains become unpredictable or the winds grow more fierce? The moment it was raised on its platform was not the final step, but a new beginning. Its blank, sightless face was a canvas awaiting its most vital transformation. After the immense effort of transport and erection, skilled artisans would perform a delicate and dangerous task high above the ground. They would carefully carve out deep, angular eye sockets. Then they would fit these sockets with gleaming white coral sclera and dark, reflective pupils made of obsidian. This was the act of opening the eyes, a ritual that was believed to awaken the statue's mana, its spiritual power. A sleeping stone ancestor became a living, seeing guardian. The effect must have been breathtaking. Under the Pacific sun, those inlaid eyes would have caught the light, giving the distant giants a piercing, watchful gaze that could be felt across the entire community. This final modification was the true completion of the statue's purpose, transforming engineering into embodiment. The modifications did not stop at the eyes. For some, their broad backs became a sacred ledger. After a statue was secured on its Ahu, artists would climb up and carve intricate petroglyphs into the stone. These are not random scratches, but deliberate symbols, often depicting the crescent shape of a ceremonial paddle, or a symbol representing female fertility. These carvings added layers of meaning, perhaps connecting the specific ancestor to broader myths, clan histories, or prayers for abundance. The statue was not a closed monument, but an interactive element in an ongoing cultural conversation. It could be updated, adorned, and reinterpreted by successive generations, its surface accumulating stories long after its creators had passed. This dynamic relationship takes a more somber turn in the later centuries of history. Archaeological evidence reveals that nearly all that once stood proudly on their platforms were deliberately toppled. They were pushed forward, face down, often breaking at the neck. The red topknots were rolled far away. This was not an act of random vandalism or a natural disaster, but a systematic cultural shift. It appears to have happened during a period of profound social change, when the old clan-based system, centered on ancestor worship and statue veneration, was being reordered. Toppling them may have been a symbolic act of severing ties with the old order, or a practical move to repurpose the sacred stone platforms for new uses. This complete, from creation to activation to eventual decommissioning, reveals the most profound truth of all. The engineering story does not end with the last lever pull or the final placement of a. The statues were never meant to be static museum pieces. They were active, breathing participants in the life of their society, subject to modification, reinterpretation, and even respectful retirement. Their physical journey from quarry to coast was matched by a spiritual journey through the culture's beliefs. They could be awakened, adorned, and when the time came, laid to rest. This dynamism shows us a culture that was not frozen in a single moment of achievement, but one that was always thinking, adapting, and redefining what its monumental legacy meant. The silent stones, therefore, speak volumes about the living, changing people who made them. The world of walking giants and sacred platforms was already a memory by the time the first European sails appeared on the horizon. The great quarries have had fallen silent generations before. When Dutch explorer Jacob made landfall on Easter Sunday in 1722, he did not witness a society in the act of creation. He encountered a people living in the shadow of a finished legacy, their ancestors' stone faces gazing out from the coast. The European arrival did not solve the mystery of how the statues were built. It ultimately made that mystery far more difficult to unravel. The contact that followed brought a wave of hardship that the isolated island was tragically unprepared to withstand. Foreign ships introduced illnesses for which they had no natural immunity, leading to severe population loss. In the 19th century, the tragedy deepened with a series of devastating slave raids. Peruvian ships kidnapped over 1,000 islanders, including many community leaders and elders, to work in South American mines. Fewer than 100 ever returned, and they brought back further disease. These combined events fractured the social fabric and severed the living chain of oral knowledge. The detailed, practical understanding of how to move a 70-ton statue, the chants that set the rhythm, the names of the master carvers, much of this was lost within a few generations. The final masters of this impossible technology took their detailed knowledge with them. This history means we are not piecing together a story from living tradition. We are reconstructing it from a cold archaeological record, from scattered tools, abandoned statues on ancient roads, and the silent testimony of the platforms themselves. It adds a profound layer of poignancy to the entire engineering mystery. We are left with the breathtaking what, but must tirelessly deduce the how, knowing the people who could have simply told us were lost to time. This severance was made visually absolute in the late 19th century. By the 1870s, every single that had ever stood proudly on an Ahu had been deliberately toppled. They were pushed forward, breaking at the neck, their stone eyes buried in the earth. The exact reasons are debated by historians. It may have been a result of internal conflict as the old clan-based social order collapsed under immense pressure. Some accounts suggest Christian missionaries, seeking to erase symbols of the old religion, ordered the statues pulled down. Whatever the direct cause, the act was a powerful symbol. The era of the standing guardians was officially over. The ancestors were laid to rest, face down, as a new and difficult chapter began. This sequence of events creates the unique challenge we face today. The brilliance of the engineers is now a puzzle we must solve backwards, starting with the finished product and working our way toward the tools and techniques, without a guidebook written by the authors themselves. It forces us to be detectives, using science, experiment, and respect to listen to what the stones are trying to tell us. Every single step of this monumental process had a very real physical cost measured in food. To understand the true scale of their commitment, we must think not just in tons of stone, but in calories of energy. The entire enterprise, from quarrying to transport to final erection, was powered by human muscle fueled by the island's harvest. Researchers have attempted to quantify this staggering investment. They calculate the total energy required to carve, move, and raise just one medium-sized statue, then multiply that by the hundreds that were successfully completed. The numbers are breathtaking. Moving an 80-ton giant several kilometers, whether by walking or dragging, would have required the sustained caloric output of dozens of people working for weeks or even months. This was energy that could not be used for other tasks, energy that had to be consumed and then expended. That energy came directly from the land and the sea. The diet was built on sweet potatoes and taro, crops they cultivated in gardens protected by stone walls. They raised chickens, and they fished the rich coastal waters. Their entire agricultural and food gathering system had to produce a significant, reliable surplus. This surplus did not just feed families, it specifically fed the specialized laborers, the carvers, the rope makers, and the transport teams who were not spending their days in the fields or on the fishing canoes. The society had to support a class of non-food producing workers, a clear sign of a complex, organized economy. This caloric economics frames the statues in a startling new light. They were not just art or ritual objects, they were the ultimate cultural investment. A massive portion of the island's total biological energy, the very fuel of life, was being diverted into creating permanent stone symbols. The sweet potatoes eaten by a carver were, in a very real sense, transformed into the curve of an eyebrow. The fish that fed a transport team became part of the statue's journey. This makes them a physical manifestation of stored social energy. It underscores the absolute, non-negotiable priority this civilization placed on honoring their ancestors and projecting their identity into the landscape. The statues were not a side project. They were the central economic engine, the cultural goal around which daily life and resource allocation were structured. This perspective helps explain the sheer number of statues and the centuries-long dedication. It was a societal choice, repeated generation after generation, to convert their hard-won harvest into a legacy of stone. This enduring mystery has given rise to its own constellation of modern speculation. In the absence of a definitive manual, some minds have ventured toward more exotic possibilities. Could the ancient builders have harnessed something beyond simple physics, like sonic vibration or harmonic resonance, to somehow levitate or glide these massive stones? Such fringe theories, while captivating, belong more to the realm of science fiction than archaeology. There is no physical evidence on the island, no tool or carving, that points to a manipulation of sound waves to reduce friction or weight. Yet, the very existence of these far-fetched ideas is telling. They are a testament to just how utterly baffling the achievement appears to our modern sensibilities. When a feat seems to brush against the impossible, it is human nature to search for an equally impossible explanation. The statues themselves seem to invite this kind of wonder. A more grounded line of speculation focuses not on lost physics, but on lost craftsmanship. Perhaps the true key was a now-forgotten material science. Consider the ropes. We know they were made from the fibrous inner bark of the tree. But what if they developed a specific, sophisticated method of weaving or treating those fibers that we have not yet replicated? A technique that produced cables of extraordinary strength and elasticity, capable of withstanding dynamic loads in a way our modern recreations with synthetic rope cannot fully mimic. The secret might have been in the preparation of the fibers, the tension of the braid, or a treatment with natural saps that we simply do not know about today. Similarly, the lost technique could have been entirely social. It might have resided in a specific, powerful chanting ritual, a precise series of calls and responses that did more than just maintain rhythm. This ritual could have been a finely tuned system for optimizing worker coordination, breathing, and exertion, turning a large group into a single, perfectly efficient engine. The exact chant, the specific cadence that maximized collective force while minimizing fatigue, may have faded from memory with the last master of the ceremony. This possibility, of a simple yet profound technique now lost to time, is what keeps the mystery vibrantly alive. It humbles our modern, tool-centric perspective. We look for complex machines, but the answer might have been a form of knowledge so embedded in the culture, so ordinary to its people, that it was never considered something to record, only something to do. It was the unwritten manual of the body and the community. This gap in our understanding is not a failure of archaeology, but an invitation. It ensures that Easter Island remains an open question, a puzzle that continues to challenge engineers, historians, and storytellers. Every new experiment, every fresh look at the old evidence, is an attempt to bridge that gap and listen for an echo of that lost knowledge. And it forces us to consider that the ultimate innovation may not have been in the stone or the rope, but in the seamless unity of the people who used them. Their silent gaze now reaches far beyond the island's shores. They have escaped the bounds of archaeology to become universal symbols, appearing in adventure films, on book covers, and in endless documentaries as the very face of ancient mystery. They represent human isolation, monumental ambition, and the haunting question of a lost civilization. This pop culture status is a double-edged sword. It fuels a wonderful, global fascination that draws people to their story, but it can also cement simplistic myths, like the old idea of a society that blindly collapsed from statue building alone. The statues risk becoming mere set decoration for our own fantasies about the past, rather than the profound cultural achievements of a real, ingenious people. Yet this very popularity also ensures they are never forgotten, keeping their mystery alive in the public imagination and inspiring new generations to ask how and why. This enduring intrigue is what makes them such a powerful catalyst for genuine scientific discovery. Today, they are not just relics, they are a living laboratory. Unraveling their secrets requires a chorus of scientific voices, from archaeologists and geologists to physicists and ecologists. It is a truly interdisciplinary puzzle, where a soil scientist's analysis of ancient pollen can reshape an engineer's theory about transport routes. Modern tools are giving us eyes where we had only speculation. High-resolution satellite imagery maps ancient roads invisible from the ground. Three-dimensional laser scanning captures every chip and contour of a statue, allowing researchers to study tool marks and erosion patterns in minute detail, without ever touching the fragile stone. Ground-penetrating radar peers beneath the earth around the Ahu Platforms, searching for buried ropes or other clues of the construction process. Even the chemistry of the soil along the statue roads is being analyzed, looking for traces of lubricants like sweet potato paste that might have eased the giant's journey. Each new data point is a small adjustment to the model, a subtle refinement of our theories. The walking hypothesis did not emerge from a single eureka moment, but from the gradual accumulation of evidence from these diverse fields, pieced together like a slow-motion revelation. This scientific journey ensures our understanding is never static. It evolves, corrects itself, and deepens with each passing year. They therefore perform a unique modern role. They are a permanent conversation between the deep past and our ceaseless drive to comprehend it. They stand as a humbling reminder that some ancient achievements continue to challenge the limits of our imagination, refusing to be fully explained. They are not problems to be solved and filed away, but enduring inspirations. In their silent, stoic presence, they ask us not just about how stones were moved, but about the incredible things human communities can accomplish when united by a shared vision. They bridge, connecting the intangible drive of those ancient builders to our own modern quest for knowledge, pushing us to continually re-examine what we think is possible. Perhaps the most elegant solution lies not in choosing one theory, but in weaving them together. Human innovation is rarely a straight line from a single brilliant idea. It is a messy, adaptive process of trial and error, shaped by changing circumstances. For the truth of moving likely followed this same pragmatic pattern. It was almost certainly a hybrid model, a flexible toolkit of techniques that evolved over generations. Early in the island's history, when the great palm forests were still standing, certain clans might have favored the sledge and roller method for particular journeys. It would have been a logical, powerful use of an abundant resource. A massive wooden sled, gliding on freshly cut logs, could have been the perfect choice for transporting a statue across a long, flat plateau. The evidence for this is not just hypothetical. The discovery of what appear to be parallel grooves worn into the bedrock along some ancient roads could support the idea of heavy sledges being dragged, their runners grinding a lasting signature into the stone. This method, while resource-intensive, would have been a demonstrably effective way to move a giant. Yet as the island's ecology gradually changed, as those vast forests receded, the calculus of transport would have shifted dramatically. The sheer cost of the sledge method in terms of timber would have become unsustainable. This very pressure could have been the mother of a more ingenious invention. Faced with a scarcity of wood for endless rollers, the master engineers would have been forced to innovate, to find a way to move the statues using far less of that precious material. This is where the walking method likely emerged and was perfected. It was an elegant adaptation, a brilliant response to new environmental realities. Instead of consuming the landscape, it worked in harmony with it, using strong rope and human coordination to achieve the same goal. This evolution makes profound sense. The walking technique is not necessarily easier than using a sledge, but it is far more resource-light. It trades timber for training, logs for rhythm. It represents a society learning to do more with less, a sign of sophisticated problem-solving under constraint. The hybrid model extends further to the very topography of the island itself. It is highly unlikely that a single technique was used for an entire journey. Think about the route from quarry to coast. A team might have used the controlled rocking motion to walk a statue across the open, rolling hills. But when they reached a steep descent, rocking would be far too dangerous. Here, they would have switched tactics. They might have constructed a lubricated earthen ramp and carefully lowered the giant down the slope using ropes as dynamic brakes. At the foot of a hill, they could have reverted to walking. For the final act of raising the statue onto its platform, they would have employed yet another set of skills, likely building a massive ramp and using a system of levers to inch the colossus upright. Each leg of the journey presented a unique puzzle, and the engineers had a full box of tools to solve them. This integrated view transforms our understanding from a search for the one right answer to an appreciation of dynamic adaptability. It portrays the not as blind followers of a single rigid dogma, but as pragmatic, brilliant problem solvers. They were engineers in the truest sense, observing their world, assessing their resources, and applying the best possible solution for the task at hand. Different clans, working in different eras or in different parts of the island, might have developed their own slight variations, their own local expertise passed down through families. The goal was not purity, it was successful delivery. The statue had to reach its Ahu, and how it got there was a matter of practical ingenuity, shaped by the materials available, the terrain encountered, and the knowledge held by the masters guiding the operation. This perspective finally lifts them from the realm of an unsolvable magic trick and places them firmly in the world of human achievement. It shows us a civilization that was thinking, learning, and adapting for centuries. Their legacy is not a secret method lost to time, but a demonstration of the incredible flexibility of the human mind when united by a common, sacred purpose. The silent stones of still hold secrets waiting for the light. This mystery is not a closed book, but an ongoing investigation where every new tool and technique brings us a whisper closer to the past. Future discoveries will likely come not from a single breakthrough, but from the steady accumulation of clues, each one refining the picture of how these giants truly moved. Imagine an archaeologist's trowel carefully brushing away soil to reveal a perfectly preserved cache of braided rope, its intricate weave still strong, telling us exactly how much tension it could bear. Or picture the discovery of a forgotten tool cache along an ancient road, with basalt picks worn in a specific pattern that reveals whether they were used for carving or perhaps for chiseling guide grooves into the bedrock. Even a single, clear set of parallel grooves or a series along a transit route could provide the definitive physical evidence that tips the scales decisively toward one method of transport over another. Our ability to listen to these clues is being transformed by technology that sees what the human eye cannot. Ground-penetrating radar, a device that sends pulses into the earth, can map subsurface features without ever lifting a shovel. Sweeping this technology along the ancient statue roads could reveal hidden foundations of temporary ramps, the compacted soil of prepared pathways, or even the buried remnants of wooden structures used for leverage. From above, satellites equipped with advanced sensors can analyze minute variations in vegetation and soil moisture, potentially tracing the faint, ghostly outlines of roads that have vanished from the surface entirely. In the laboratory, geochemical sourcing techniques are becoming so precise they can pinpoint the exact quarry, sometimes even the specific ledge, where a particular stone was taken. This could allow researchers to map the journeys of individual statues with astonishing accuracy, tracing the path of a specific from its birth in the mountain to its final resting place on the coast, and revealing whether it took a direct route or a more complex, negotiated path across the island. Alongside these high-tech tools, there remains an irreplaceable human element, the power of hands-on experimentation. Future projects will likely push the boundaries of what we try to recreate. Teams may attempt to move a full-size replica using only authentic materials, braiding ropes from processed bark, and using stone tools to prepare the way. These scaled-up experiments would test not just the physics, but the human factors, the coordination, and the sheer endurance required. How many people are truly needed to maintain the rhythm for a mile? How do you communicate and correct course without a single spoken command? Each attempt, whether a success or a revealing failure, adds another data point to our understanding. The story of thee is therefore still being written. Its next chapter may come from the gentle scrape of a trowel revealing a lost artifact, from the silent ping of radar revealing a hidden structure, or from the coordinated strain of a modern team trying to walk in the footsteps of the ancients. Each discovery inches us closer, not to a simple answer, but to a deeper empathy for the brilliant, pragmatic minds who looked at a mountain and saw a community's destiny carved in stone. The story of Easter Island echoes far beyond its shores as a modern parable of sustainability. For decades, it has been framed as a stark warning, a civilization that consumed its resources to build monuments and ultimately faced the consequences. While we now understand their history was far more complex than a simple tale of collapse, the core lesson retains a profound resonance. Its brilliant engineering, their ability to walk giants across the land, existed within a closed and finite system. Their island world had hard boundaries, and every resource they used, from the trees for rope to the soil for food, was drawn from that same limited pool. Their genius was in maximizing what they had, but even the most ingenious society must eventually navigate the balance between ambition and endurance. This is not a story of failure, but a timeless study in living within limits. They themselves became the physical focus of that balance, a channel for the community's energy and materials. For centuries, the system worked. They adapted their methods, perhaps shifting from resource-heavy transport to the elegant walking technique as the forests changed. They synchronized their monumental work with the seasons and the harvest. Yet, the very scale of their cultural project, sustained over so many generations, placed an immense, continuous demand on their environment. It prompts a difficult but essential question for any society. How do you measure the long-term cost of your grandest visions? We see this dynamic reflected in our own world. Our modern monuments are not stone giants, but sprawling cities, vast agricultural systems, and globe-spanning industries. We channel immense resources and collective effort into these projects, driven by our own forms of ambition, necessity, and belief in progress. The parallel lies in the consideration of legacy. The builders of the likely did not foresee the distant challenges their descendants might face, just as the pioneers of our industrial age could not fully envision today's environmental conversations. The lesson is not to stop building or creating, but to build with a deeper awareness of the web of life that supports us. True ingenuity, the seam to whisper, is not just about solving the immediate puzzle of moving a mountain. It is about designing systems that can endure, that replenish as much as they consume, and that leave a foundation for those who come next. It is the ingenuity that looks at a brilliant technical solution and also asks, what does this cost our home, and for how long can we sustain it? This shifts their legacy from one of mystery alone to one of meaning. They stand today not only as marvels of ancient engineering, but as silent teachers. Their weathered faces gaze upon a world still grappling with the same fundamental challenge they faced, the challenge of sustaining a vibrant culture on a planet with limits. They remind us that our most awe-inspiring achievements must be coupled with stewardship. The greatest testament to a civilization's brilliance may ultimately be found not in the height of its monuments, but in the health of the land that remains long after the work is done. Their enduring presence is a quiet challenge to every generation, to create and build in ways that honor both our boundless ambitions and the fragile living world that makes all ambition possible. From the volcanic womb to the solemn Ahu Platforms, the journey of thee is a staggering saga of human imagination, cooperation, and grit. We have walked the quarries frozen in time, debated the physics of transport, and listened to the echoes of a social engine that powered this centuries-long project. While we may never know every precise chant or the exact grip of a master carver's hand, the overwhelming evidence paints a clear and magnificent portrait. This was not the work of a lost civilization wielding magic or mystery, but of a culture of brilliant practical engineers. They were masters of their limited environment, who looked at a mountain of soft tuff and saw a community of ancestors waiting to be released. They confronted the problem of moving a 70-ton block across miles of rugged hills and devised an elegant solution, a slow, rhythmic dance that turned human coordination into forward motion. Their toolkit was stunningly simple: stone, rope, wood, and soil. Their true technology was the accumulated wisdom of generations, a deep, intuitive understanding of balance, leverage, and collective will. They achieved the seemingly impossible with nothing but these basic elements and an unwavering cultural determination. The impossible engineering of the Easter Island statues ultimately reveals a profound and timeless truth. When a community is united by a deep, shared purpose, when every member contributes to a vision larger than themselves, humanity can achieve wonders that resonate across the ages. These stone giants are far more than silent sentinels on a remote shore. They are eternal monuments to the boundless potential of the human spirit. They ask us to look at our own world, at the monumental challenges we face together, and to consider what we might build, what barriers we might overcome, with a similar unity of vision and purpose. What do you think their greatest lesson is for us today? Share your thoughts below, and if this journey into ancient ingenuity captivated you, subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries.